So, how are you? Thank you for joining.
I'm well. I'm glad you created this opportunity for people. I'll be interested to hear what other people have to say about their why.
Yeah, me too. I'm just kind of curious about this because I kind of had this observation that actually I was thinking about this on the way here, and I was running a bit late because of an accident, unfortunately, on the road. But nonetheless, when I was sitting there, I was kind of thinking about what's behind this is a kind of a recognition that we have some great stories to tell.
Mm-hmm.
And it strikes me that the stories are the things that kind of change people and strike a chord with people. And the stories are all about our why.
Yeah.
So that's
sounds good. Yeah.
So, John, we've not spoken before, and I must admit you have an amazing beard, which is just perfect.
Well, it needs to trim at the moment, but
Feels like I'm sort of looking into a mirror.
That's right.
My hormones in other parts of my head are going a different way. So, John, tell us about where you are, actually, a little bit about where you are, because this looks a very interesting place.
Well, where I am geographically right now is in a town called Farmville, Virginia, which is about an hour and a half from Charlottesville. And for those people who know Jean Catherine Gray and Jen Lucas and the folks at Divine Play, that's where I'm putting up my time for the time being, for the coming year. But we've just spent close to 30 years in Georgia. We're actually returning to Virginia. We were here for 10 years and we moved down to Georgia. I've been a college professor teaching theater for 38 years, just retired in August. And so that's kind of my story as far as where I am geographically and a little bit about where I am philosophically, professionally, and all the rest of it. But I do have a story about my why. Do you want me to jump into that?
Yeah, let's go for that now.
Okay. All right. Well, let me just preface it by saying, I'm kind of a big fan of Simon Sinek, actually. And one of the things that he says I think the book is called Start With Why. He says something along the lines of communication happens not when people are talking, but when people are listening. And I really like that. And I remember watching a video of Mara Gleason addressing a class of One Thought pupils and making the observation that she thought, well, if there's a metaphor for the principles, which is kind of odd because the principles in a way we have to speak of them metaphorically, but if there's a metaphor for the principles, it's listening. Not just listening in the sense of, talking to somebody and hearing what they have to say and that sort of thing, but sort of listening to the world, being present and being very open and responsive to the world around you. So with that preamble, I'll just say that as far as my why is concerned, when you posted your request for people to share their why, I instantly remembered where I was coming from at the time. In 2010, I was still teaching, but in 2010, I knew I was going to want to have a second career, and I was looking at coaching. So I trained in a traditional coaching program. As you know, traditional coaching programs give you a toolkit of techniques that you apply. You use them. You use them on your clients in a sense, and you give them techniques to go out and sort of deal with their issues and that sort of thing. And I always felt a little awkward with it. I always felt like it was a little artificial and a little forced and that sort of thing. But the reason I bring that up is because I have a daughter. So my why is a very personal thing. I have a lovely daughter. She's 28 now. She has grown up to be just a marvelous human being, a very capable, grounded, mature, resourceful human being. But that was not always the case. She went through a phase, and I would say, late high school, college, maybe even, a year or two after college, where I mean, she wasn't, I mean, it wasn't, we didn't really get into it with one another or anything like that, or arguments, but she was very, very reactive. I used to say that to her, I used to say, you know, you're kind of catastrophizing things. I mean, for something like she couldn't find her keys and it was like the world was going to end, that sort of thing. Or, you know, she just deciding what to wear in the morning became a major incident and that sort of thing. And a few times I tried to talk to her, but of course I was operating from the toolkit of techniques. And I can remember a couple of times, her name is Sarah, a couple of times Sarah said, "Dad, don't you coach me. I don't want to be coached by you," right? So, you know, I threw my arms up in the air and said, okay. And it's at a certain point, because I was coaching already, I ran into Michael Neal's book, Supercoach. Supercoach in turn led me to the Inside Out Revolution, which in turn led me to the Principles, and the rest is sort of history. And I realized that there was something different about the three principles of the Inside Out understanding. And I never said anything to my daughter about them. I never taught my daughter the principles, and I never coached her from the principles. But I changed. I was transformed as a result of my exposure and ultimately training in this understanding. And I'm convinced now that her shift, her transformation had to do with the shift in me. Because what my work with the principles brought home to me is that she learned to be reactive from me. she by osmosis or by my example or my modeling, she was seeing me being reactive. She was seeing me catastrophizing things. And I simply stopped doing that. And she would see me come up against obstacles or concerns of my own in my life with a great deal of equanimity, great deal of calm and presence and that sort of thing. And I think that that's where her shift began as well. And now she is so, and we're much closer in a lot of ways because we're not, there isn't any role distance between us. There isn't this parent-daughter kind of thing anymore. We're very much talking to each other as real people, as who we really are from our essence. And her essence is really a spectacular thing to behold. She's going to set the world on fire, and I'm very proud of her. And I don't mean to suggest that I really had anything to do with it. I think that what the principles, the impact that the principles had on me changed me in a very palpable way. And just as, you know, I've been a teacher my whole life, just as, you know, if we connect with our students in a way that is immediate and spontaneous and real, we're going to have a different kind of experience than if we're coming from a kind of a regimented, artificial pose of the academic or the instructor or that sort of thing. So that was my why. And I don't think I thought about it that much until I read your post, and I went, you know, I immediately said, well, I know what my why was, but I'd never spoken it to anybody. Yeah. I'd never shared it with anybody, but there it is.
Wow. So I'm curious, your daughter might hear this.
Yeah, well, I hope that she'd be pleased. The one thing I have done that has to do with the principles, and I didn't say that was what it was about, but recently there was a conference in London called the Women's Wellness Conference, with people like Jackie Ford and Jacqueline Hollows and folks like that. And my daughter is now very much a social activist and very much a feminist and outspoken about her feelings about equality and things like that. So I said to her, how would you like to go to London and go to this conference? I'll pay your airfare and you can, you know, stay in that nice hotel and you can meet some people I actually know. I mean, I know some of these people. And she said, oh, that's it. Well, she loves London. She's been there a couple of times already, and she's, you know, she loves London. So she didn't necessarily know what I was sending her to. And she knew she'd have a little time to play in London. So she said yes, you know, and she went, and I think it really had an impact on her, because when she got back, she was all about the women's movement. She was all about feminism. She was all about the women's strike. She was all about the women's march. She was all about, you know, helping people to understand the full dimension of feminism as not just that it was intersectional and all of that sort of thing. And she's really educated about it now. So it wouldn't bother me one bit if she saw this interview. I don't think it would bother her.
No, clearly. And there was something from the heart there with what you were saying, and it was almost as if she was saying it too. It would be nice to get some feedback. But hey, let's see. So, yeah. Is that all of your why? No. There's another dimension that has emerged and evolved over time. Okay. And that is that I have done theater for 50 years, over 50 years. And one of the through lines in my theater life has been improvisational acting. Mm-hmm. And it very quickly became evident to me that my background in improvisational acting was very similar to my experience of the Inside Out understanding. How is that so? Well, because neither of them are driven by techniques and strategies. Improvisational acting is just as the three principles are. It's an understanding. You will be good at improvisational theater, not because you have a bag of tricks to apply when you get up there to do your improv, but because you understand how improv works. Right. The nature of improvisational acting. And in fact, I've recently put out on Facebook an offer of a program, which I'm sort of, I'm doing a beta test on it and asking people, you know, if I were to offer a program like this, what kind of takeaway would you want? What kind of components, you know, would be attractive to you? And I'm about to create a Facebook page in which I begin to describe what some of the parallels are. For example, there's the immediacy of it. You're going to be best as an improvisational actor if you have very little on your mind and you're just able to lead, right? Who'd have guessed? Yeah. And yeah, in fact, one of the things I'm going to come up with is a list of all the things that poor improvisational actors tend to have on their mind that gets in the way of their ability to connect on stage and be effective as an improv actor. Another thing about improv acting, like coaching from the three principles, is that improv actors are very sensitive to context. Very sensitive to context. And what I mean by that is they're very, very good at calibrating what's in front of them. Okay. Now, if you imagine a client sitting in front of you, this is not a cookie cutter deal. You know, this is not a cookie cutter deal. It's very context specific. And so I think good three principles coaches and good improv actors are very context sensitive. Mm-hmm. The other thing that they do is we don't jump in and try to change for its own sake. In the case of coaching, we don't jump right into teaching them and trying to fix a client, right? Mm-hmm.
with improv, we don't jump in and try to steer where the scene is going to go in a certain direction because our ego tells us that would be cool, you know, because when we do that, we kind of ruin it, actually, kind of spoil it.
Yeah, and you can see it, can't you?
Yeah,
It becomes
yeah. So there are a lot of parallels like that between the two. And I'll just share this with you. I actually think this is kind of cool because it's where I was going. You know, I'm working with Jean Catherine Gray at Divine Play in her Building a Business program. And she said, so she was telling me what she was really good at and how it led into what she's doing, the way that she's making a career out of her understanding of the principles and so on. She said, so what is it for you? John, she said, what is it for you that is like that? And I said, well, it would have to be improv theater. And she said, why is that? And I said, well, it's just a way of being for me. I was telling her the story of I went to visit Dave Nichols at Center for Sustainable Change. And while I was down there, he took me over to a transitional housing site where a former client of his who he helped via the principles is the operations manager. And while I was there, I saw an opportunity. It just came to me in that spontaneous improvisational way. I said, you know, what if I came down here and I stayed in one of these units and I interviewed the people here and got their stories and created a book of the transformations that have happened because of what's going on here at what's called Independence Place Community Living. There's people there who are coming in from being homeless, who are coming in from dependency issues, who are vets with PTSD issues, who are being really uplifted by just the experience of this guy, Nate Moore, and his staff, who are living the principles. They're not sitting down and having classes in the principles with these people. They're just living them, and it's sort of like, I think what I'm saying about my change having an impact on my daughter, you know? And so that was an improvisational moment. I actually wrote a little blog about it. I said, you know, if I hadn't had my training in improvisational acting understanding and had that be just a kind of become a way of being for me, a kind of a second nature default thing that I knew that I could just kind of, what the term in improv is that everything's an offer. Everything's an opportunity, in other words. You know, something comes up, your antennae are always out for what that opportunity is and how you can make something of it. Even things that happen in your life that are unfortunate, perhaps, or we might characterize as not so positive, they're opportunities too for us to rise to the occasion and that sort of thing. So that's very exciting to me. That's a part of my why as well.
Well, yeah, I can imagine that, and likewise, I see some hows in there too, and what you're up to in terms of what you bring to your community and stuff. But the interesting thing as I was listening to that, you know, improvisation is kind of what we're up to all the time.
That's it. Somebody, you know, I was on the Building Community Telesummit a few days before I went over to the center, and somebody called in and said, well, you know, and I don't know whether he was being cheeky or what, but he said, isn't that just life? Aren't we improvising life? And I said, that's not a trick question. That's not you know, that's not a snarky question or anything like that. The answer is yes.
Yeah.
But the thing is, because we live it every day, we don't think of it as we're making it up as we go along. Yeah. And we've grown accustomed to the fact in everyday life that we're always, you know, we're always confronted with the not yet known. But somehow when we meet a client who is struggling with some contaminated thinking or some thought storms or whatever it might be, they desperately want to cling to what they know, and their resistance comes from story or the concepts or the ideas that they have about how they should be or how the world should be or whatever it is. And when we make it clear that, you know, they're going to find fresh thinking in the not yet known, and that in fact they're doing that all the time in their everyday life. It opens things up for them, I think.
Yeah, I love a world where we're always improvising. That's astonishing.
Isn't that great?
It's beautiful. I really like that. I'm kind of, my mind is drawn back to that famous TV program called Whose Line Is It Anywhere, and the way that Whose Line Is It Anyway?
Yeah.
And the way that kind of weaves its way, and the beauty of what comes out of that sometimes. And like you were saying, sometimes it kind of ends in a crash when they bring themselves into it rather than.
It can. Usually it ends in a crash when they get in their own way.
Yeah,
exactly. I mean, and it's the same thing. It's the same thing in life. It's the same thing when a coach is with a client or working with a group. It crashes. It crashes because they begin to get up in their head about what's going on in the moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's amazing. Thank you for that. I've learned something today, which is lovely. So superb. Well done. So
well,
there was a bit of how in there as well. Is that your how? Would you add any more to kind of how you bring the principles to life in the community, or is
well, I'm going to be working, Martin, with a number of different populations. I've been getting certificates in working with school children, both elementary, middle, and secondary school children, through Brooks, Brooke Wilden, gosh, how do you say her last name? Brooks Cypress Initiative down in Tampa, and also Krista Campsell's work. Both of them have just published new curricula. And so I'll be doing some of that. I've got a group of 50 veterans here that I'm speaking to on Tuesday night. I think I'm the keynote speaker, talking to them about this understanding and perhaps setting up a year-long program of working with them. And consequently, I've been in communication with Judy Sedgman because she has 3 groups of veterans down in Florida that she works with. So I'll probably be going down there and shadowing some of the work that she does. There's a wonderful video that Judy had produced of her interviewing Bill Pettit, and Bill Pettit talking about trauma in general, but post-traumatic stress syndrome in particular. It's a fabulous interview, and I'm actually, you know, on Tuesday night, I'm going to refer them to that and say, because they're going to give me 15 minutes to speak. I'm not going to, I say, you know, I'll probably in 15 minutes only accomplish confusing you, because it's not something that I can really spell out for you in 15 minutes. But I'm going to send them to the link to this interview, which is fantastic, and say, this is where I'm coming from. If I work with you vets, this is going to be the understanding that I'm going to bring to the table.
I think I've seen the interview actually. It's quite
very powerful. Yeah. Very powerful. So there's that, and of course I'll continue to coach individuals, and you know there are other opportunities that are there, but as I indicated in my previous comments, I think over time, I will devote more and more energy to programs that have to do with these parallels between improv and the 3 principles, and because I can talk about how the principles clarify what's really going on in improv when it works, and improv clarifies or is a demonstration of the principles at work when it works. So I'll probably spend more and more time on that. I have some writing projects that I want to do. I'm actually working on a book right now. This is like confessional time. I'm actually working on something right now called Addiction, The Surprise of My Life.
Okay. Is that the working title, is it?
Yeah, and it's a fairly recent thing, Martin, in that I actually this grew out of a long weekend at the Pranskys, training with them, and about 4 days before I went out, I ran out of some prescription medications, and I didn't have time to get them renewed.
Yep.
By the time I got to the Pranskys, I was in withdrawal from Xanax and high-powered sleeping pills.
Oh, joy.
And over the course of the time that I was there, I was in serious withdrawal from prescription drugs. And I never even thought of myself as being addicted to prescription drugs. But then I started to think about all the addictions that I've had in my life. I was addicted to smoking. I was addicted to achievement. The list goes on. There's a lot of things that I've been addicted to, which I thought were sort of, I don't know, what can I call them? Genteel addictions, okay? Something like that. But man, when I started I didn't even realize how serious the situation was. And in hindsight, I probably should have been under a doctor's care while this was going on, because when I got home, I didn't sleep the entire 5 days I was out there, not one wink. And I was in high alert mode and experiencing all kinds of physical sensations, which were very, very unpleasant. I got home and I Googled Xanax. I said, what the heck is this? Because I'd been taking this stuff for 15 years just as a maintenance drug. I didn't, I sound so naive saying this, but I really didn't know what I was doing. And clearly my doctor should have been more responsible about this. But nonetheless, I got home and I started reading about Xanax, and I went, wow, this is bad news stuff here. And I saw what it was, and it really wasn't. I mean, I would say that I wasn't total. This was in early December. I really wasn't free of the physical withdrawal until a couple of weeks ago.
Wow.
And what I want to do in the book is talk about, you may have read this little article about the antidote to addiction is not, the pharmaceutical industry wants to give you yet another drug so they can make more money to help you withdraw. No way am I going to let them do that. I'm not going to give them any more of my money. But they say that human connection is the real antidote to addiction, because what addiction is the mistaken belief that your well-being lies somewhere outside of you. Mm. And that if something feels good, you keep doing it because, and usually that has to do with, and I have to tell you this funny story. While I was there, one of the things I was doing was I was doing an application. I was working with a client, being observed by the Pranskys, working with a client. And she was talking about a kind of an addiction. I said, I just had to deal with the fact that I've been addicted to achievement for a really, really long time. As soon as I achieved something, my mantra was, well, you're only as good as your last achievement, so I better get started on the next one. Which, of course, you can never satisfy that Jones, as we call it, that need. And so I was explaining this to her, and I said, thank God that I was not addicted to gambling or serial sex or porn or prescription drugs. And as soon as I said prescription drugs in that session, I went, oh my God. I just lied to her because I am addicted to it. That was my wake up right there.
Yeah.
And what the last thing I really want to say about this is, it occurred to me I couldn't possibly have been in a better place. Mm-hmm. Now, to this day, the Pranskys do not know what the hell that was all about. They just thought I was a shitty coach, or I was like having serious anxiety attacks while I was out there. They had no idea what was happening to me in terms. And to this day, I haven't revealed that to them. Although it'll get back to them sooner or later, because I've told a couple of people who will tell a couple of people. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But yeah, and so you know, boy, you know, when you talk about the principles, that's what you said at the beginning of the call, is the things that are most compelling in terms of being able to encourage other people to see that transformation is real through a grounding in the principles, is through our experience. Sydney Banks always said, talk about what you know.
Mm-hmm.
And I know some things now, Martin, that I didn't know 6 months ago.
Yeah.
That I can talk about,
well,
that I think that are helpful to people.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I was talking to someone with a hope to doing an interview to this morning, actually, and we got the times mixed up, sadly. But I did have a quick conversation with this lady, and she shared something with me, which, wow, yes. And you just never know when you're going to get it. And it was lovely, because this girl, she's not quite a practitioner yet. And I wish she will be soon. But yes, she said something to me which shook me. Quite lovely, and likewise today with you as well. And the improv thing, I think, was beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. So I hesitate to ask whether there is a what you do. It sounds like, you know, you shared much of that.
Well, I would say, actually, you know, this is so interesting, especially if you think about what Simon Sinek says in his book. The what is actually the last piece of the puzzle.
Cool.
And most of the world has it backwards. They start with the what without any consideration of the why or how.
Yeah.
Which is why there's so much struggle, probably, in the world. Because the thing about the why is, if you have clarity about that, and the principles are all about achieving clarity, God knows. If you have clarity about that, the how and the what tend to fall into place.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
You know, and in fact, part of the adventure for me, one of the things I like about the principles is the comfort that I have with the not yet known. So there's probably many what's out there that I haven't even dreamed up yet, that I will be excited to discover, to see. You know, that maybe have been there all along. You know how you're reading and you come across a word. I just wrote a little blog post about this. You see a word and you go, I've never seen that word before. Let me look it up in the dictionary. Mm-hmm. You look it up in the dictionary and you go, oh, well, that's what it means. That's just, you know, I've just never seen that word before. And then after you look it up, you run into that word everywhere. It's like you probably had seen it 1,000 times, but not seen it. And all of a sudden, now you get it and you see it everywhere. So that's kind of what that, you know, this experience has been like for me, especially my observation of other people and my compassion for other people who get caught up. And I just, I can say to myself, well, me too. Yeah, I get caught up too. You know, we're all human.
Yeah, that's very powerful, actually. For me personally, the compassion thing was something that I've been in tears with some clients, just saying, well, hey, what them asking, what have you got from this? And I've sat with it for a while and thought, actually, it's just the capacity for compassion for people is enormous now. And it was just nowhere near, well, it was there to be seen, but I have compassion for everyone, no matter what they've done or what they do or where they are. I'm so sorry for that. And, you know, it's just a simple human mistake. And why would you have anything but compassion for someone that's just misunderstands something?
Exactly. You were talking about being in tears. One of the things that has happened to me in the last few months is more openly emotional and comfortable with my own emotions than I've ever been.
Yeah.
I mean, I cry now at the drop of a hat, but it's not out of sadness. Usually it's out of joy, like talking about my daughter, for example.
Mm-hmm.
My daughter, I was telling my daughter that I was going to be coming back down to Georgia and visiting, speaking in several classes of a former colleague in the university where he teaches about multiple subjects, and he was going to pay my expenses and all that sort of thing. And she said, well, what does he teach? I said, well, he teaches communication and that sort of thing. She says, oh, I know. And the part of the context there was, I said that he was part of a team that was working to encourage undergraduates to get more serious about reading, because we live in such a visual culture, and they're glued to their phones now and all this kind of stuff. And so I was telling her all this, and she said to me, Dad, do you think that I could team teach those classes with you? And I just, wow. You know, I just said, really? You would want to do that? She said, well, I would love to be teaching side by side with my dad. She said, reading heuristics was my favorite class in graduate school. She said, we'd be great together. And I'm just like, just bawling like a baby. And I'm going, you don't know how happy you make me. And she says, if that's the case, why are you crying? I said, well, you'll understand. Sometimes people cry out of joy.
Yeah.
And to be able to access that, and because we become armored over time in this defensive ego posture of, you know, that's all a function of this misunderstanding that we get caught up in.
You've got me going as well. This is lovely.
It's beautiful. It's so beautiful. I mean, God, now somebody posts somebody about rescuing a dog on Facebook, and I just lose it. You know? But you know, the thing with my daughter was there's a wonderful Seamus Heaney poem. You know, the Nobel Prize winning Irish poet. He's got a poem called Postscript, which I absolutely love, because I've spent a lot of time in Ireland as an academic. I was an Irish studies scholar. And he's got a postscript is a poem about, he's driving along the west coast of Ireland, which is absolutely spectacularly beautiful. And he describes the beautiful coast off to one side of the car, and the landscape of the Burren, this rocky, fabulous, moonscapey kind of landscape on the other side. And he says, and nearby, on the land side, there's a lake, and he describes the swans on the lake, and he's painting this picture of the beauty of this experience that he's having. And he says, and it all caught my heart unaware and blew it wide open.
Yeah.
And that's what's been happening to me. I mean, just spontaneously going, wow, this is some beautiful world we live in if we're awake to it.
Yeah, it's so true.
Isn't that amazing? I love that. So yeah, I cry a lot now.
Good man. Good man. Well, let's celebrate that. So listen, Will, I think it's been wonderful talking to you. Now listen, I'm curious, if people wanted to get in touch with you, what would be the best way?
Well, the best way would probably just to shoot me an email at Countryman Coaches. That's all one uninterrupted lowercase alphabet phrase, Countryman Coaches at gmail.com.
Okay, perfect.
That would work.
All right, okay.
And I hope they do.
Well, I hope they do too. Let's see. I will edit this and throw it out onto the into the world later today, hopefully. And let's see what happens. And thank you so much for connecting. And you're an amazing man. I'm so pleased that we've connected and you shared this with me today. So well done.
Yes, and best of luck on your project. And thanks for the opportunity. Yeah.
Thank you.
Cheers, Martin.
Okay. Cheers, John. Bye bye for now.
Bye bye.